From game day to signing day, breaking down every snap and all the news on Alabama's top football recruits. It's time for Crimson and Blue Chips with your host, John Garcia Jr.
Good Friday morning, CABC family. We are the audio authority on all things Alabama football, as well as recruiting. I'm your host, John Garcia Jr. Bit of a free-for-all edition of the podcast today. We are going to hit a variety of topics, quick hitter style, so I'm not going to spend too much time on any one thing, but where we are going to spend the bulk of our time today, as always, is with you, Q&A style. We've got questions via Twitter, where you can hit us at CABC Pod. We've got questions via Instagram, where, again, CABC Pod is the way to go. We've even got a couple of email questions where you can get in touch with us there as well, cabcpod@gmail.com. So let's wrap up the week with you, our listeners. A little bit of quick hitters before that. $600 million. The Crimson Standard. We're going to go over that just a little bit. Some of the perks you may not have seen in the video, etc. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the latest edition of Rollin with the Tide on ESPN. Is it beneficial and is it truly revealing? I'm going to ask those two questions and then, as we said, wrap it up with you guys. Q&A style, as always. Wrapping up a good week right here on CABC.
A bit of a different flow today on CABC, as we mentioned. Going to hit on a few topics and really dig into Q&A. We need to spend more time with you guys for sure. But before we do that, talking about some of the newest items visually, especially, that we've been able to see over the last 2 days. On Wednesday, the newest Rollin with the Tide came out. And then on Thursday, of course, Alabama announced a huge upcoming project called the Crimson Standard. And more than $500 million is going to Alabama for just a few buildings, whether it's Bryant-Denny Stadium, Coleman Coliseum, the Malmore Athletic Facility. A whole lot of cash is going into making something that's pretty nice already even better over what is expected to be a 10-year initiative. So producer Kev's going to come in here, and he's got a little bit more on it. But basically, everything's going to look better. And we think we have a little hypothesis that some of the more flashy elements and different elements for the fan experience have to do with the change in perhaps alcoholic culture coming to the country, coming to the SEC. They're planning ahead here. Alabama always trying to be one step ahead, and it looks like that's going to become a bit of a factor, at least from where we sit. But Kev, I know there's a lot of notes to get to here. $600 million initiative called the Crimson Standard. There was a fancy video played on Thursday. We'll play that for our YouTube watchers here. Basically, everything that looks nice is going to look nicer, bigger, better, more sleek, more efficient. A whole lot more script A's and roll tides everywhere. But that's really just the beginning of what is quite the overhaul going down in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this Crimson Standard initiative. They're going to be renovating the Malmore complex, which we know houses the football team and the athletic dining facilities. They're going to be renovating Coleman Coliseum for the basketball program, the volleyball program, the gymnastics, and then of course they're going to be renovating Bryant-Denny Stadium, the home of the football team. So just wanted to touch a little bit on each one. For the Malmore complex that houses the workout facility and everything else, the players' lounges and stuff like that. We were in there 3 years ago, and that place was amazing.
It was brand new.
It was like, brand new.
Hey, check out the new renovations. Cool. Like, let's take this little tour.
Yeah, we got a guided tour through the facility, and it was amazing. It was unlike anything I had ever seen as far as football facility wise, and but keeping with keeping up with the Joneses. Alabama's putting some money into the Malmore complex, and they're going to be doing a lot of different stuff here. So a couple quick ones on that one is they're going to be redoing the lobby, which I thought the lobby was really cool because they actually had Malmore's ring display in the lobby, but they've now moved that into like the Hall of Champions. So the lobby's getting some renovated visual stuff. The stairwell is being moved, and they're going to relocate the reception desk, and they're adding a video component, which a lot of these renovations, if you look at the sketches and stuff like that, there's a ton of video components on all of it, whether it's TVs, whether it's like big video boards,
it's like videos on the walls, on the ceilings, on the floor.
Yeah, there's just video stuff everywhere. So I can see where $600 million is. There's going to be a lot of electronics involved, and then the locker room's getting completely renovated with new lockers, which 3 years ago it had just been completely renovated with new lockers.
Super nice, by the way.
Super nice. So it's getting new lockers. They're going to redo the configuration, which will create a lounge space in the locker room, which there was already a lounge space in the locker room. They had the big script A in the middle with the couches around it, and it had four 55-inch TVs put together to make one big TV.
Something like that, yeah.
And at that time, there was a couple players in there, and they were watching Jurassic World that had just came out in theaters, but they were watching it on the TV in their locker room. So
I don't know if you should say that, but too late.
Well, whoops.
Those players are gone anyway. Oh well.
And then inside of that, they're gonna relocate the recovery pools, and they're gonna put them in with the hydrotherapy area, which is gonna be new. The training rooms and the equipment spaces are being flipped, they say, for efficiency. And each one's going to get bigger. The equipment room's going to be bigger, and the laundry room's going to be bigger, because everybody knows you got to have big laundry space with all that stuff that they're washing. And then there's going to be a new hydrotherapy area. It's going to be completely refigured. Then the big thing that I saw for the Malmore complex is it's going to be a 2-level sports science center. So I don't know if they're going to be building on top of the already existing building or how that's going to go, but they're going to be building a 2-level sports science center, and it's going to feature treatment options such as cryotherapy, a chiropractor, a massage therapist. Another big one that, I guess it's a big issue in football and everything right now kind of is the mental health services, trying to break that stigma of, the mental health, how mental health looks in athletics. So they're adding a mental health services, which I thought was pretty cool. And then there's going to be a relaxation and recovery area, which we talked about a couple of pods ago, where it looks like in the rendering that it's going to be sleep pods. So now, now they really have no reason to leave the facility.
There every day, all day.
Keep them there 24/7.
They're going to move the dorms there one day. Just everything connected. It's like an indoor mall. Yep.
They probably will. And then also the current weight room is going to be expanded, which if you've seen that weight room, it's one of the biggest weight rooms in the country already. But it's going to be expanded as well for in the Malmore complex. And then for Coleman Coliseum, which is the home of men and women's basketball and gymnastics, it's gonna get a new roof. It's gonna get new seating areas. So it's gonna have club seats, multiple lounge spaces, like we hit on a second ago, that seem kind of bar-esque.
Oh, they're getting ready.
So they're just waiting on. I'm pretty sure they're just waiting on alcohol to be approved to serve, and then there's going to be a courtside club that provides like game day experience for all the different athletic events that are going to be in there. They are going to the renovations for the Coliseum are going to shrink the seating size to about 9,500 to 10,000. And Alabama said that that's where they wanted their seating capacity for the Coliseum. I don't know if they thought maybe it was a little too much right now. But it's going to be about 95 to 10,000 for the new seating arrangements. The upper bowl is being redesigned, and the lower bowl is getting a little bit of a facelift as well. And then, of course, Bryant-Denny Stadium is getting a ton of upgrades. It's already a beautiful facility in itself, but it's getting a lot more things going into it. So the first thing is the Walk of Champions. It's not necessarily the actual the walkway that they're redoing, but when you get to the front of the stadium, it's now going to have a video tunnel.
Yeah, they ran out of space, man. They ran out of space.
I know. They're having to find places to put things now.
We'll just go underground. How about that?
So
luckily they're not in South Florida where they can't.
So the tunnel is going to lead from the Walk of Champions straight into the locker room because, heaven forbid they have to make a couple turns to get to the locker room. So they're going to walk straight into the locker room on that. Then there's going to be a bunch of seating changes. They said that they're going to add about 3,900 new premium seats. So these are sky boxes, and they're redoing the Founders Suite, and they're going to relocate the press box. They're renovating all of the recruiting areas. So they're making those very they're expanding on them, and they're making them they're trying to make them look good because this is where the kids and families are going to be for recruiting events and stuff like that. You always want to make good impressions there. They're expanding the concourse areas to allow for better flow in and out of games. Because I can see where that one would be it could get congested getting in and out of a game at Bryant-Denny. And so they're saying that it's going to help with traffic flow. And then they're renovating the concession area and the main concourse to provide a better in-game game day experience for the fans at Bryant-Denny. So the different premium seating stuff is the Champions Club, which looks like a bar. The Terrace Club, the Lodge Boxes, the Northfield Club. They didn't even try to hide that one. The East Side Sky Boxes, and then of course the Founders Suite. And obviously these are cost you some money to get into. So the Lodge Boxes, the suggested capital gift is $150,000 payable over 5 years. And you get 4 seats for that.
My goodness.
The Champions Club per seat is $10,000, and that's a 10-year term. The Terrace Club per seat is $10,000, and that gets you 10 years as well. So then the Northfield Club is actually a pass, and it's going to be $2,200 annually. And
if any of our listeners are considering buying those seats, email us at cabcpod@gmail.com, and we would love to have you sponsor our show. And maybe we can go do a live show at Camping World Stadium. We could be at LSU, Iron Bowl. I mean, CABC live in front of stadiums. Because if you got that kind of cash, football to you is it's like more than a way of life. It's like destroying your bank account, or maybe not. So, yeah, email us, cabcpod@gmail.com, and we would love to work with you because you want this show to be great. And we get some resources like that, we'll be everywhere. We'll be national. Just saying. Just saying.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, crazy upgrades, man. I mean, it's everywhere.
It's so much. Like,
yeah, the video board going up. I think that one's going to be the biggest in the SEC now. It's like a shot at Auburn.
Auburn put theirs up. Last year was the first year it was actually up, right? Or 2 years ago.
They started it 2 years ago, but I think last year.
But last year was the first year they used it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was their big claim. Auburn's claim was, oh, we have the biggest video board in the SEC, and Alabama said, well, hold my beer real quick.
Yeah. And they'll literally be able to say that in a few years.
Yeah. So I think that's where it's probably headed. So
crazy.
It'd be a good thing. And then also one other thing is they started the Crimson Tide Scholarship Fund, and it provides the Alabama athletics with annual scholarship support for the student athletes. The fund currently funds approximately $19 million for 500 student athletes in 21 sports. So funds raised through this are going to go directly to student athlete scholarships. It's supposed to help offset the overall scholarship funding needed for the athletic department.
Yeah, so it's just so much going on. We could do a whole show on it if we wanted to, but that would probably be a little boring after a while. But anyway, you can read more about it at crimsonstandard.com, bamaonline.com. There's a lot of text to get to. We thank producer Kev for jumping in on that one and helping us out there. I think we want to shift gears now before we get to Q&A.
Well, if you want to look at it, it's actually on the online. It's going to be at crimsonfoundation.org.
Oh, wrong website. Sorry. Oh well, they'll be okay. I think they're going to get their clicks either way. We'll move to more clicks, I guess, in a different way. Views, as Rollin with the Tide, episode 2 dropped this week. And look, we're getting some cool access and some different angles. Certainly some different thoughts from Nick Saban, assistant coaches, things like that. But, for a nerd like me, I'm kind of disappointed. First episode, I gave it kind of a mulligan, like, okay, they're trying to introduce it. Fine, like we'll get more later, but no, I think we're getting less. I mean, the most action we're getting are like slow motion sit-ups and stretch lines. This is an all access, yes, and I commend Nick Saban for allowing it. Yes, I mean, no surprise, dude's in love with ESPN, but this is really more of an all access off the field. It's like it's more of a reality TV show than a football show, and to me, that's a little disappointing, especially considering the timing. I think if this was a true off-season deal, like in the spring or into the summer, I think that would have been more reflective of what we wanted, kind of just more the human side of it. But it's August, man. It's like we're ramping up to the season. Give me practice footage. Give me one-on-ones. Give me a fight. You telling me there hasn't been a fight at camp? Not even a little one? Give me the Hard Knocks version, and maybe we're spoiled because HBO does such a good job there, but give me the drama. Give me the plays. Give me the battle. They're not giving us any of that. There's more footage shown in those 1-minute hype videos that Alabama football will tweet out or put on Instagram than what we're getting in an hour-long presentation from this, all-access thing. And Kev put it in air quotes last week, and I think it's true. It's like the human access is really cool. Look, you got Kobe Bryant, you got Nick Saban, extended conversation, Tosh Lupoy addressing the team, getting into stuff, but there's no nitty gritty with that. It's almost a philosophical show at this point. Nick Saban's message after practice beyond the X's and O's, and maybe that's what people want, but that's not what I want. You told me it was an hour long, 4 different installments. I'm thinking we're gonna get Jonah Williams against Terrell Lewis before he gets hurt. We're gonna get Raekwon Davis going up against Ross Pierce-Baker every day. That's what I wanted. But maybe I'm spoiled. I don't know. But I don't know how beneficial this is for the football fan. If you're a diehard Crimson Tide fan, I mean, you're getting great access to Nick Saban and some exclusive interviews with the players and stuff, and that's great. There's certainly value there. But, man, I would have bet money that there would have been more football on that show. And I think we got a lot of stretch lines and a couple of mic'd up coaches, but a little disappointed. And maybe this is Nick Saban. Look, maybe Saban is saying, hey, look, y'all can be around, but he's probably editorializing this whole thing, which is kind of an ethical question mark journalistically. But again, it's Nick Saban, so if he's giving you access, I guess you got to yield to some point. But, man, I just expected more football.
He's sitting in an editing chair somewhere.
Yeah, he's on Skype. He's on Skype like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and cut that out.
Well, yeah, because, I mean,
like
he went to –
every Jalen interception is like, nah, cut that out. Cut that out. Yeah, I don't know. Just a little disappointing. Again, this is not a knock. It's more than we had, right? It's more than the media get. It's more than the media who bust their ass every day in Tuscaloosa. Like, that's kind of unfair. But they're basically showing us the same thing the media is able to see. Something like stretching and some individual drills. That's kind of it. I don't know. They hyped up the competition at quarterback, and they haven't shown us anything since. So we did get some cold tub stuff, though. If you were wondering about cold tubs in football, which is, like heat and sweat, those are just normal elements of football. You got that. So you got 10 minutes on cold tub etiquette, cold tub protocol, and stuff like that. I mean, that's what we're getting. Maybe I'm spoiled. Maybe I'm old. I don't know. But I just wanted more football. I thought we were going to get a lot more football, and we've just got a reality show hyping up a program through its administration and guest speakers instead of why that program really doesn't need any additional hype, which is the football. Give us more football, ESPN. Edit that thing. Go over Nick Saban. He'll be all right. He still loves you.
Absolutely. I just want to just reiterate on what you said. Like, I think we are spoiled because we watch Hard Knocks every year. They really do such a good job. But like you said, like, you can't tell me there hasn't been a freaking O-line, D-line fight during camp or something. Like, it's always like, we always had at least one or two good ones. Like, you can't tell me that hasn't happened yet. Like,
I know. It's camp, man. It's camp with a bunch of elite athletes and alphas. There has to be a little more drama than Nick Saban getting mad at the effort and making them run extra 110s. Like, that's it. Come on.
That's it. Like, that's all you have to give us. Like, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, we'll move on. But if you wanted a recap, there's our recap. Episode 2. You got some good Kobe stuff, some good Mamba mentality, and
which was really cool.
Right. And we knew that would be cool because he's got a lot of Bama-like qualities, and that was going to work. But we just want a little bit more. That's all.
Let's move over to Q&A as we wrap up each and every edition of Crimson and Blue Chips. We're going to do so beginning with Instagram. Friend of the program chiming in. It's Dayton Chapman. He's curious as to something that I would imagine a lot of you guys and gals are curious about. First, he says, who do you think Bama will finish with for the 2019 class? Obviously here, a lot going on in 2019. Multiple commitments, almost 24 at this point. But we all know Bama gearing up for a pretty big finish at the end here. How many 5 stars is a question we get a lot. Will it be all 5 stars is a question that we have gotten as well. But obviously that's super optimistic. That's just not something that is, I guess, predictable at this point anyway with the remainder of this 2019 cycle. But I can say I'm not predicting any 3 stars to end up in Alabama's class from here on out. 5s and 4s only, blue chips only, hence the name of our show, right? Crimson and Blue Chips. Look, this list starts with Clay Webb. That's the guy in state. That's the guy who is becoming one of the most puzzling recruits to track. We've covered him for 2+ years now, and at different points it seemed like different schools were really kind of in the driver's seat, whether it was Alabama, whether it was Auburn. And now I guess Georgia has some of the buzz. But one, is it true? Is it sustainable buzz? Or is this a matter of, hey, the kid doesn't really say much, and we're reading the tea leaves a little too much, so Georgia has the bandwagon now? I think it's a combination of both there. I don't think Georgia feels great. I don't think Auburn feels great. I don't think Alabama feels as great as they once did. I think everyone's kind of, tiptoeing around this thing. So Clay Webb is going to be a tough recruit to crack, it seems, until he finally goes public with a decision. So you can make the case for all three programs. I think Alabama remains the safest bet, but the security, the net for that safety may be not as tight as it was 6 months ago, what have you. This thing is still ongoing. Silent commit, I think every kid in the country is a possibility to be one, except for Clay. I don't see it with him. One, he doesn't care about the public in terms of their opinion. He just doesn't care. He's not up on recruiting. He's not on Twitter checking everything out. He's not keeping up with the rankings, anything like that. Clay Webb doesn't know he dropped a bunch of spots on one recruiting outlet, and he doesn't care. So just the makeup of him doesn't make me think he's a silent commitment. And again, we've confirmed at multiple junctures that he wasn't a silent commitment at the University of Alabama as well. However, when he's done, he'll go public. And I still think, all things considered, the longevity of his recruitment, that Alabama is in the driver's seat compared to Georgia and Auburn just right now. That can change. It probably will change. But I don't think the kid's going to make a decision until he 100% knows where he is going. So until we really learn something tangibly more than speculation and buzz, we're going to stick with Alabama with that pick. I'm going to tell you, probably all the way through, unless we really hear, okay, this kid's not going to Bama, and when we hear why and we hear how. Until that point, I'm going to ride with Clay Webb in this class for UA. So he's a guy that I do expect Alabama to finish with in the class of 2019. A couple other guys, we'll spend less time on them. I think there's another offensive lineman going to join the group, whether it's Darnell Wright, whether it's Evan Neal. One of those guys is probably going to be on board. Tennessee holding the momentum currently with Darnell Wright and perhaps extending that lead, that perceived lead, according to 24/7 Sports sources. And then conversely, Evan Neal, it seems like Miami's theoretical lead for him has shrunken a little bit here over the last several weeks and even months, which is good news for Alabama because it's pretty clear this is a Miami-Alabama battle. Florida State in the conversation still, a couple of other schools in the conversation still, maybe Florida. But for all intents and purposes, this is Miami versus Alabama, Rick versus Saban for 5-star Evan Neal. And we keep hearing good things about Alabama. Same thing for his teammate and a guy who he has been at IMG with for the last 3 years, Trey Sanders, 5-star running back. We continue to hear good things about Alabama. Florida, the clear top threat there. But again, not all said and done. I actually think Evan Neal is more settled than Trey Sanders is. So that could be something to track a little bit for the rest of the season as things begin at IMG Academy. They actually have a scrimmage tonight, and yours truly will head down to Bradenton to get a live look at Trey Sanders, Evan Neal, Nolan Smith, and the rest of that ridiculously talented crew. So I think those guys are certainly in the mix. Daxton Hill among the 5-stars that, as of right now, we think Bama's got a really good shot for. But again, Daxton has prolonged this thing. The number one safety in the land has prolonged this thing a good bit, and we're not sure where it's going to end up. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. The longer he goes, the more credence for Michigan and maybe the in-state schools creep back into it. Oklahoma State, where his big brother plays, has always kind of been looming. What if they rattle off some wins? What if Big Bro's having a really good year like we all expect him to? maybe they can creep back into it. Again, the surprise in that entire recruitment is how early Oklahoma seems to truly be out of the mix there, which I think is the best news possible for Alabama. You'd rather go against Michigan and Oklahoma State, no disrespect to those programs. So I think those are the most consistent guys we hear about. But that second tier is kind of the group of guys that we need to talk more about, whether it's Siaki Ika, whether it's Noah Pola-Gates, safety from Arizona, safety corner combo guy really from Arizona, Tyreek Stevenson, the corner from Miami. I mean, these are some of the guys who we expect to hear more about. These guys are going to take their recruitments a little bit longer, it seems. Fa'atui Tuitele is another one in this conversation. Ishmael Sopsher is another one in this conversation. These are guys that you could very well see in the class or out of the class, and it's not really a stretch. So these are the guys on the second tier that first of all, we don't know their position on the board, with the exception of Sopsher. Jalen McCullough's in this group. Nick Cross is in this group. These are guys who we're just kind of waiting on. Where does Bama stand? I think you go to wide receiver with some guys here too. George Pickens, Jamison Williams. Where does Bama stand for these guys? How high are they on the pecking order? And most importantly, what spots are left in this group? I think that's where it gets really tricky, and why this is a really good question from our guy, Dayton Chapman, because the numbers are going to dictate this thing more than if a kid wants to go to Alabama. So with less than 10 spots remaining, how does it get shaken out? What about inside linebacker? Nakobe Dean. Who else is in that conversation? Can Bama flip a guy like Ryan Davis from Georgia? Can Bama get a guy like Mohamed Diabate, in-state from Auburn High School? He's committing August 22nd. The buzz right now is with the Florida Gators. Does Bama want Diabate in the class? How hard is Bama pushing for a guy like that? These are all questions that seem extremely fluid. So there's a lot of names remaining in 2019. I think some of those five-star guys are the safer bets, ironically enough, because we know where they stand. Well, both with Alabama and with their own options. So I think that's where it looks a little bit more simple to attack this question. So if I had to predict it right now, let's say there's 7-8 spots left as Bama rounds out this class of 2019. As I said, I think the IMG teammates right now are Bama bound more so than otherwise. So Evan Neal, Trey Sanders, there's two right there. I think the number one safety, Daxton Hill, is right there. Until he takes that Michigan official visit, I don't think we're going to learn much more. And he takes it next month. So for now, I think Bama's got a good shot. We'll see after that trip. Remember, Bama already hosted him for his visit. So those 3 5-stars, I think, are good. Clay Webb is going to fluctuate. But again, for now, we're going to roll with Alabama on that one as well. So that's 4. That's about half of the class in terms of remaining spots. Then it gets tricky. That's where you wonder about Nakobe Dean. You wonder about the safety position if you don't get Daxton Hill. You wonder about tight end. Will Bama take a second tight end? What about a second running back? Things like, or we already mentioned Trey Sanders there, but that's where the numbers get really, really tricky. So I will stick to the interior on the defensive line for at least one more guy. I think let's predict a flip. How about Mr. Leal committed to Texas A&M? Let's see Bama return the favor there after losing 2 commits to A&M last year instead of bringing in Tuitele or getting Sopsher out of Louisiana. Maybe that's a little bit more likely for Leal to end up in Bama's class. So just 3 spots left after that point. There's got to be a linebacker, we would think. Nakobe Dean is really swinging for the fences for Alabama, but presumably it will lose out on Diabate. So it seems like all the chips, or most of the chips at linebacker for now, are in on Nakobe Dean. Henry To'oto is another one to keep an eye on, but I'm just not sure the gap between Dean and him on the board. And then in terms of numbers and all that, it gets really tricky, especially after the addition of Ale Cajo. So we'll say one of those linebackers jumps on board. And then for the remaining spots, I think it's about who's available and who you pressure at that time. A second wide receiver and a corner. I think those are the 2 final positions that are the hardest to predict at this moment. Can Bama flip George Pickens? What about Jamison Williams? Those are tricky. I'm not really ready to answer that now. I think flipping Pickens might be harder than landing Williams. So I'll say Williams for the wide receiver spot. And then when you look at a guy at corner, Tyreek Stevenson has a lot of buzz elsewhere at this point. So does Bama attack another player at that position? It remains to be seen. So it's that question that you asked, Dayton, getting a little bit harder to answer. And then the second part of your question, or the second question, who will be Bama's best commitment in the 2020 class? We're taking a look at the 2020 class right now. 7 commits on board at the moment. Jason Jones, DeZalen Worsham, Jackson Bratton, Javier Morton, Malachi Moore, Carson Beck, and Caden Clark. So you got a little bit of everything. You got a quarterback, you've got a receiver, multiple trench prospects. Well, one's technically a tight end, one's a defensive tackle who we think can play offense. Don't listen to me there, Jason. I know you don't want to hear it. And I think that's where I go with it in terms of the top 2020 commitment. I know Bama's in for a lot more 2020 guys, obviously, higher ranked 2020 guys, 5 stars at the different positions. But on the current commitment list, Jason Jones is the highest ranked right now. And I know in the state he's going to retain that post. And I think his profile is only going to grow as more people see him. Like we said on Wednesday, a lot of people hadn't seen this kid. He hasn't been to a lot of camps. He hasn't performed at a lot of camps. So we went out and saw him at practice, and then we were like, all right, he could solidify that number 1 spot. So now I think more and more people will see him during games, playing both sides of the football. And I think he could really become the bell cow for Alabama's class of 2020. In-state kid. I mean, he plays for Andrew Zhao. This thing is lining up kind of like a Pierce Quick scenario in 2020. Quick's the highest ranked at 19 and has carried that flag all day long. I think Jones will eventually do the same in that 2020 class. I think he's got legitimate 5-star potential. Doesn't mean he's going to get that bump, but I think that is going to be a part of the conversation for him for the next several months. So keep an eye on Jason Jones. You're not going to hear about him a ton. Not a lot of people have seen him, but for those who have, including this guy right now, pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. And again, we have full video from what we saw on Wednesday's Crimson and Blue Chip. So check us out there on YouTube from this past Wednesday's show. That would have been August 15th. So he's kind of my pick there. But the 2020 class, rock solid early on, number 2 in the country at this point. We got a question coming in on Twitter from Luke Ferguson, and he's going right after it. He tweets the show, not sure if you could answer this, but can you tell us who you think are the most overrated 5-star players? We know you keep it real. Oh, Luke. Trying to get after me, I see. Well, let's head over to the class of 2019 rankings on 24/7 Sports. If we're looking at the 24/7 Sports composite, that means we're looking at everybody, right? That means we're looking at absolutely everybody. So we'll sort that very quickly. And the 5 stars go pretty deep nowadays. The class is, about to start the football season. So there's a much better sample of how these guys can play. So the composite 5 stars go all the way to 35 right now on the 24/7 Sports composite. And Pierce Quick is that 35th guy on the composite. So he's moved down to some, but still a 5-star in that composite. I already have one candidate just looking at this list. I'm going to scroll back closer to the top to see if I feel better about it. I got 2 candidates now. For those looking at the simulcast, you might have already seen a couple of names that make sense to you. I've got 3 to at least mention. I'm going to see him tonight, so maybe I should hold my tongue here, but y'all that know me know that I'm not very good at that. So this question about who I think are the most overrated 5 stars, basically you're asking me who do I think is a 4-star or lower. That is currently a 24/7 Sports composite 5-star. 3 names. 1, I go with Trey Sanders. I like his ability a ton. Look, 5 stars to me, and we've had this conversation on the pod before. 5 stars to me are special, instant impact, first-round talent, barely any flaws type players. Clear upside, clear ability to get better. Sanders, I think, is a little bit closer to his max in terms of his body, height, weight, speed, ability. I don't know how much better he's going to get. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it hurt guys like Najee Harris and Dylan Moses, etc. Bo Scarborough didn't get a ton better from his senior year of high school until right now, and he's in the NFL. So that's not always a killer in terms of the projection business. But compared to five-star running backs of the past, I mean, think of some other names who have held that distinction. When you think of guys like Derrick Henry, you think of guys like Najee Harris, you think of guys like Cam Akers, you think of guys like Christian McCaffrey, you think of guys who are like Leonard Fournette, like no-brainer 5 stars. And the running back position should be an easy one to project at that level. If you're talking about once-in-a-generation type backs, Adrian Petersons of the world, Todd Gurley's of the world, I mean, we missed on that one. He was a 4-star. Those should be easy. And I see Trey Sanders, and I don't think that immediately. Again, not saying he's a bad player, not saying he's not an NFL player, not saying he's not a guy who's going to have a ton of carries at the next level. But at that position, you got to be special. You got to be jaw-dropping. Now with the ability to improve. And one, I think he's as solid as it gets, but not jaw-dropping. And I don't know how much he's going to improve. Shifty enough, fast enough, but not a home run hitter. Good out of the backfield, not great out of the backfield. Big, steady, but could probably run with more power. So those are things that, all three of those are not question marks, but you kind of, it leaves a little bit to be desired there. And again, I'm talking about 5-star status. We're talking about the best of the best, so I'm splitting hairs to a large degree. So I think he's got room to prove that tonight, beginning tonight. I'm going to see him in person for the first time in pads in quite some time. So maybe I'll take this all back on Monday's pod. But like you said, Luke, I try to keep it real. So we'll see if I'll take that L if that comes to fruition. And this has nothing to do where he's going to go. He's probably going to go to Alabama. So I'm basically telling you an Alabama prospect is overrated. So sue me if you don't like it. Another guy on that list who I think's a little bit fringe-worthy instead of that solidified 5-star status, Dominic Blaylock, the wide receiver, son of Mookie Blaylock, former basketball player, so that's kind of cool. But this is a kid we've seen in person a bunch. I think this is a great wide receiver class. But first of all, 6'1.5", 187, probably generous for Dominic Blaylock, the Georgia commitment. Explosive player, smooth player, consistent player, all great things. But again, for me, talking about 5 stars, it's another level. I think Dominic is a solid slot receiver, a guy who's going to catch a lot of passes, who's going to rack up some yards, but he's not a guy that screams first-round draft pick to me. He's a smaller guy. Think of a Calvin Ridley in terms of height and weight coming out of high school. And if you compare the two, I mean, what a gap. Whether it was in high school football, 7-on-7, projection game in terms of where they get better, how much there's a big difference between those guys. And Calvin Ridley wasn't this like number 1 player in the country type guy either. So just looking at precedent at the position, 5-star receivers are typically the big, strong, fast, wow guys. The A.J. Browns of the world. The guys who you look at and say, that dude looks like a 5-star receiver. And then you watch him play, and then your jaw drops. And I'd like to flip Blaylock and another receiver who we're very familiar with in this conversation. I think George Pickens could maybe vault him in the composite. He's not a 5-star right now in that composite, but comparatively, in terms of jaw-dropping, ability to improve, frame, all those things. I mean, the only real knock on Pickens is his speed. Yet, when you watch him play, he's behind everyone. Blaylock has speed as a strength, but he's a smaller guy. He's more of an inside presence, it feels like. And look, we saw them play together. Hazelwood, Pickens, and Blaylock were all on the same 7-on-7 team at the opening with Bo Nix. And nobody was talking about Dominic Blaylock. He was solid. I did his highlights. He was solid, got open, made catches, good stuff. But it wasn't jaw-dropping like the other guys. And if you're not jaw-dropping in that setting as a wide receiver, it's a question mark at best. So just comparatively, I think he's a guy who might be a tad high at this point. But again, senior seasons are upon us, so we'll see how he does on Friday nights once again. And again, we're splitting hairs here. We're talking about guys who are all very, very good, all committed to great schools. So I'm not saying these guys should be 2 stars. I'm just saying 5 stars is like first-round talent. And I just think these guys are slightly below that. And again, if I'm wrong, I'll eat my words because we keep it real, as Luke Ferguson said. And then the third guy I'll mention very briefly, Spencer Rattler, the quarterback from Pinnacle High School in Phoenix, Arizona, committed to Oklahoma. I don't think there's a 5-star quarterback in this class. I don't think there's a quarterback in this class that makes me say, man, this dude in 3 years will be a first-round draft pick, will be a guy they build a franchise around. That can change, but, I mean, I think Bo Nix is better than Spencer Rattler, first of all. He got the Elite 11 MVP because he beat Bo Nix in that championship game. So on the same field, he was better for that half an hour. But over the bulk of the week, it was Bo Nix running away with all of that. But Spencer got hot at the right time. You give him credit for that. And again, we're not knocking these kids. We're just talking about 5-star status, the best of the best, splitting hairs. I think he's a guy who's a bit overrated at this point. I think naturally in this business, you expect the number 1 quarterback in the nation to have 5 stars by his name. It's kind of a default. I think it happens at running back. It happens at cornerback. It happens at a lot of positions. But I'm against that. I don't think you give a kid that just to give it to him. And then that's not the only reason. I mean, heck, 24/7 Sports has given Rattler that 5th star as well. He's a consistent player. He's pretty fluid. He's a good leader. I think he has a lot of great qualities, good footwork, good release, effortless release. But, man, the arm strength doesn't wow you. His touch has a lot of room to improve. We saw him sail a lot of passes down in Texas, or at least I did. So there's just – and he's not the biggest filled out dude either, so you don't know how that's going to work out. Again, you can project it, but you don't know. 6'1", 181 pounds. I know the game has changed, and he's going to a wide-open system that has done well with smaller quarterbacks, including the number 1 pick in the draft. But there's just a couple of elements of his game that I'm like, he could improve all of them and prove us wrong, but that's a lot to ask. He needs to fill out more. He needs to work on the arm strength. He needs to polish up his touch as well. I mean, that's 3 pretty big deals at the quarterback position. That's a little too much for me to indicate 5-star status. But hey, other people have seen him more than me, so maybe, again, I'm way out of line here. But those are some of the guys that I think are a little above the pay grade, if you will. We'll wrap up with 2 email questions. The first one's coming in from Army Dave in Pennsylvania. Sir, thank you for your service. I come from an Army family. I've moved all around the country, and it's a different life. So we appreciate what you've done, Dave. He says, first time with comments, but never miss your podcast. It's great stuff. Thank you, Dave. He says, as a Bama fan here in Georgia, Kirby is a pain in the ass. Worried about the long-term effects Kirby will have on Bama's success. My question is, do you see this as a major problem in the road ahead, or simply a matter of being the new toy that will wear off? 1. The common denominator is the number 1 recruiting class for what seems forever is Kirby, as Bama was number 1 when he was there. UGA may not be number 1 right now, but in reality they are, because we are ahead in volume only. This is alarming since Bama retained the spot of top team. When and if UGA wins it all, it could make them even more of a threat. So the part of my question is, I guess he's asking a little bit more, how can Georgia be a threat? How long and how real? Dave, I think it's real. I think it's real. Obviously winning a national title is everything in this game. So if and when that happens, yeah, it'll increase. I think there's no doubt about that. Look at Clemson. Look at Ohio State in general, not right now. All of those things have propelled those guys over the top. Florida State before that, and Alabama every other year, it seems. There's no doubt that will answer the only question left to answer at Georgia. Can UGA win it all? It hasn't since before I was born. So when will that happen? It probably should have happened last year, but it didn't. So there will always be that doubt. So I think the part of the gap between Alabama and Georgia is that doubt. As soon as it is erased, it's fair game. And this thing will be more neck and neck every single year, which I predicted the moment Kirby got the job. I said, look, this is Alabama's biggest threat. It's not Auburn. It's not LSU. It's not Ohio State, USC, Texas, name a school. It is Georgia. It is Kirby Smart, and it will be for quite some time. It's happened a little sooner than I expected. It may have been a little sooner than Kirby expected, for all we know. But there's no doubt that's the school that Bama's going to battle all day long. That is the top threat, absolutely. And then the second part of your question, Dave, hearing rumors that Clay is actually now a Kirby commit. He just doesn't want to early commit publicly because he does not want to deal with all the haters and comments back in Bama. My question is your thoughts on this. We touched on Clay a little bit earlier, Dave. I don't see him as the silent type. I just don't. Anything can happen in recruiting. There are no absolutes in recruiting. It's fluid. It's crazy. It'll have twists and turns when you don't expect it. All of those things we talk about each and every cycle. But, man, this kid just goes against the grain on everything that we know about the game, about recruiting. I don't see him as a silent. Now, is UGA a true threat and option for him? I think 100% yes. But as a true silent, I just don't see it. I think when Clay's ready, he pops publicly, and he's done. He's not going to take visits after that. He's not going to be open. He's not going to do a ton of interviews. He's probably not even going to recruit guys to Georgia or Bama or Auburn, wherever he ends up. He's going to commit and be done and do his own thing and enroll and compete immediately. That's it. So I just don't see a silent commitment being a part of his timeline. Stranger things have happened, but man, this would be a top 5, top 10 type surprise for me, especially with the state of Alabama guy, a guy we've known for multiple years. We know his family, we know his coaches, we know his teammates. I think a lot of people will be surprised by this. Again, the last time I was at Oxford High School, somebody I was with laughed uncontrollably when I asked them the chances of Clay leaving the state of Alabama. So there's just so many ammunition items there with Clay that make me think, one, it's going to be tough for UGA, and two, if they do get him, it will not be one of these covert operations. It'll be out in the open, he'll be done, and it'll be maybe the most indicative sign of how strong Kirby Smart and company will be on the trail both now and moving forward. It's one thing to get a prospect head-to-head in the state of Georgia. You come to Bama and get the number one prospect in the state when both Alabama and Auburn very much want him. Now everybody's ears are perked up. Now everybody's put on notice, and it's very tangible, the power of that G and Kirby Smart's recruiting prowess. But I don't think he's a silent just yet. And then finally, Dylan Britt with another question. On the last pod, I heard you talking about LSU being the best college football head coaching job. Me being a huge Bama fan, it's hard to admit, but I completely agree. Wow, I'm not crazy, right? Dylan says, great talent in the state and no in-state rivals. My question is a hard one, but I'm going to throw it your way. Oh boy. Who do you see replacing Nick at Bama? And in all caps, Dylan says, Dabo. Thanks. God bless, Dylan Britt. Thank you for the question, Dylan. Whoo, that's a big one. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a big one. Look, that's a question that we actually, I was talking to producer Kev, we were thinking about asking today. So that's really funny that it's come up. But I think Dabo is the de facto candidate, right? The number one thing we wanted to see from him, it was kind of like what we just talked about with Kirby. We knew he could recruit. He's got all the ties to the state of Alabama and the University of Alabama that you want. But could he really win at that level? And beating Bama to get over that hump, to erase all of the doubt, that about did it for me. I was pretty much done with the question marks surrounding Dabo. The only other ones, honestly, I had personally with him after winning the Natty in Tampa was about just his how do I say this? What he puts off. There are a lot of guys who pride themselves on of who they are, how genuine they are, how faithful they are, things like that. And anytime it is very abundant, it's abundantly clear that's what the person is attempting to put off, whether it's Tim Tebow, whether it's Hugh Freeze, whether it's Dabo Swinney. Well, guys, when guys are pushing faith more than most, it makes you ask, how legitimate is this? Right? We're humans. We can ask that. I definitely will ask that. And I think you get your answer over time. I don't think you can get the answer in a little snapshot. You know, like, oh, in this little bubble, yeah, I'm all in. I think he's legit. But with Dabo, that question was a few years ago. And as time has progressed and we've talked to more kids and we've talked to more coaches and we've talked to more parents and we're around the program more in general because they've been in the spotlight, I think it's legit. I don't think it's a stunt. I don't think it's a partial all-inness, to use their phrase, all in. I think it's legit. So I don't really have questions about Dabo at all in terms of his ability to replace anybody and coach anywhere. So I think he's still candidate number one. Now, obviously, how much time in between now and Nick hanging it up? How much time goes down? What goes down? Those are things we don't know. But for now, it's Dabo, and then it's everybody else. I'll leave the rest up to you guys for interpretation. I'm sure we'll hit on that more later on, but for now, that'll be it for Crimson and Blue Chips. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. God bless. Garcia out.